that wanted to end the racialization process, the casta system of privileges that Mexico still has struggles with, because there's always anti-democratic forces pitted against progressive reform. Just take a look at this administration today, and the Trump administration, and how it's totally anti-democratic, and it always attacks progressive reform. Well, that's what Mexico was up to. Especially those who wish to end racialization process, and that is Jose Maria Morelos y Pavón and Vicente Guerrero. They were Afro-mestizos. They wanted to end the casta system. So Mexico, again, has this dance that, if you will, to end the racialization process. Now, in order to attract market activity to its northern frontier, Mexico opened its borders and allowed American immigrants to come into Texas. And they came in waves to take advantage of the cheap land that was available. However, the lax policies provided opportunities to people who had no interest in honoring the Mexican Constitution, much less becoming citizens of the new nation. So these Americans that just came in waves into Texas as a result of Mexico opening up its border, and primarily because Texas was a Native American nation. It was the Comanche Nation's control that Mexico could not eliminate. And so they thought that by opening up settlement, Americans would come in and then they could get rid of the Comanche problem. But Mexico stopped its immigration policy. But Mexico did not have an effective border patrol, did not have sufficient funds to create a border patrol. So when Mexico stopped its immigration policy in early 1830s, Americans, border or no border, were coming to occupy Texas. And these illegal aliens are then going to protest against Mexican rule, especially when slavery is going to be abolished by the central government. So how does one want to remember the Alamo? Land, borders, slavery, and territory. The Alamo erupted over all of these issues. Texas declared its independence, yet the historical record reveals that Texans had no interest in nationhood. Texas, as an independent nation, was funded by the South in its 9-year existence, desperately awaiting a U.S. administration that would be willing to annex it. And that administration will arrive in the 1840s. Let's go to a film clip recognizing the Alamo.
The reason the Alamo arrests our attention and has attracted the attention of generations of Americans ever since it happened is, at its core, very simple. It's a battle in which everybody dies.
Well, the Alamo is an interesting saga in American frontier development, American independence, war with our neighboring nation, Mexico.
Texas is a province of Mexico, a rebellious province of Mexico, even before the Americans had arrived. And the Mexican army is coming back to reclaim its territory. Considers that the Americans are either invaders, if they came to aid the rebellion, or traitors, if they were settlers there who had pledged their allegiance to Mexico.
And there in this Alamo, the old mission, the Americans hold up. About 100 of them, they get some reinforcements. And the famous people in American history that we know about that's so associated with the Alamo, Davy Crockett and Colonel Travis and Jim Bowie.
At the Alamo, you have one of these American citizen armies, volunteer armies, only 186 some odd guys, defending this outpost against an army of thousands, hoping for aid, hoping for rescue, and ultimately recognizing that they're going to be disappointed in their hope of rescue.
And this is the imagery that most Americans have, that they were overrun by these brutal Mexican forces and killed.
Great tragic losses are always more compelling, more dramatic than great victories, in part because they bring us face to face with something that's going to happen to all of us. We're going to die. The Alamo, in its day, gave them a moral cause, and so they raced into subsequent battles saying, "Remember the Alamo." And of course, Texans have been remembering the Alamo ever since.
The Alamo is part of American culture the most widely visited historical site in the state of Texas, and in a sense kind of an icon in American history of the mid-19th century.
Okay, so that's the Alamo. Now let's appreciate the United States war with Mexico. The war, when deliberated by Americans, is portrayed as an extension of the debate over slavery versus free labor. U.S. historians deliberately distort the people's experiences and couch the war in sectional rivalry. There is no attempt, even by the most liberal of writers, to look at the war in terms of human rights and its consequences to people on both sides of the border. Yet the war is a terrible object lesson. This is an episode in a people's history. See, Mexico lost. Mexicans lost. And the events of the war could not help but encourage people to take a hard look at where they were going and what they were doing. Mexico is smaller. A sense of nationalism is born. Not all societies develop a sense of this. But Mexican nationalism isn't created by the war, but it is stimulated by it. Why? Because there's a historical fate. A portion of the nation is to be outside the boundaries of the nation. And this fact is going to have further consequences in Mexican history and what will develop in the United States as Chicano history. Millions of its citizens live outside Mexico to this day. So the U.S. war with Mexico, again, must be looked at in terms of human rights. The U.S. war with Mexico must be looked at in terms of its consequences to the people on both sides of the border. The United States acquired a territory that to it was vital. The legitimacy of the United States holding on is a question that continues to be raised in the scholarly literature. Because the U.S. acquired a people with a different sense of history, the U.S. acquired a people with a different culture, a different geographic experience, a different linguistic heritage, a different environmental orientation. This population was growing at the time of the takeover. We know that this population is growing today. And so America needs to come to terms with its conquest. The United States became an aggressor nation. Now you can lie to the school children, and the politicians documented for the record that this nation was blemished because there were clear material consequences for the occupation. Let's go to a film clip on the war